Is Amiibo going to survive the end of the Switch lifetime? I'm not sure it will. Premise. I think, based on the leaks and the rumors and the consistency between them, that we're going to get a Switch 2 end of 2024-ish. Probably September. If I recall correctly, that's when they released the original Switch. Don't quote me on that. Whether I think this or not, we are going to get a new console within the next 1 or 2 years. The Switch is just so old. So the question is, what happens to Amiibo on the new Switch? Okay? Do we even include it? There's no handheld line now. The Switch is the handheld line and the console line. So there's no handheld line to keep Amiibo alive with the new Switch. Okay? I don't think Amiibo is profitable enough to include on the Switch 2. Let me explain the costs. When you look at the cost of Nintendo controllers, historically they have been pricey but not expensive. Okay? I remember back in the day when I was a wee lad, Wii remotes sold for about $40. MSRP, brand new. That was with the new Motion Plus in them. That was all the like cool colors that I always wanted to buy as a kid and never did, and I still haven't gotten to. Gamepad, the Wii U gamepad was like $100. I mean, it was pretty serious, and it had a screen, but just an itty bitty screen is not going to contribute that much to the cost of a controller. Okay, you remember the new 3DS? The internals of the new 3DS were actually about the same price as the internals of the old 3DS when the old 3DS was the new 3DS, if that makes sense. If English is not your first language, I apologize for that sentence. The one hardware change that they made, besides horsepower, that consistently applied across all 3DS models, except for 2DS, which is why it was so much cheaper, was Amiibo functionality. If I remember correctly, the 2DS did not have Amiibo functionality. One more point to make, and then I'll move on. Remember that little disc that you could infrared connect to your 3DS to scan Amiibo? How much did that cost MSRP? It's about $50, wasn't it? If you look for NFC readers, like quality industrial strength NFC readers, the kind that Nintendo uses for their controllers, you'll find that they cost to consumers about $30 to $40 per unit. Okay? Now, what if you're buying 12 million of them? You may get a bulk discount, but come on. Amiibo functionality costs Nintendo so much money on a per unit basis for each console sold that it might, I don't know the exact numbers, I can just make my best guess based on Consumer Reports, but it might be a 10 to 15% increase in cost per unit. Okay? And every single Switch that's ever been sold had to have Amiibo functionality. All right. So how many, what is it? Like 60, 70 million Switches have been sold. Let's say that the Integ readers and the Joy-Cons, just the Joy-Cons alone for the Switch, cost $30 each. Okay. 70 million times $30. It's like $2.1 billion just to include Amiibo functionality. That's just a sunk cost, by the way. That they haven't made money on that yet. Okay? So within Nintendo they're hoping that people will buy enough Amiibo figures to come up with that $2.1 billion cost and make that money back. Okay? Amiibo are not particularly they're not marked up as much as you'd think they are. They're very high quality figures. Okay? And the fact that they only cost $16 blows my mind compared to how much other companies charge for similar quality figures. That's why some Amiibo are actually more expensive than $16. You take the Loftwing one, which was like $25. It was more finely detailed, right? Nintendo doesn't make that much profit on Amiibo. And given the overhead costs, not just from per unit, the 2-ish back of the envelope loose number from including it in the Switch, but also the staffing costs, the distribution costs, the cuts that they have to make to the owners of the intellectual property that they make Amiibo for, okay? It's a thin margin, probably. I don't think that Nintendo is making more than $3 to $4 per Amiibo. So if you're trying to make up a $2.1 billion investment, how are you going to recover 500 million Amiibo sales from that? They've never even made that many Amiibo, let alone sold them. Okay. Now, part of their strategy is also Amiibo cards, because Amiibo cards are just pure profit. I mean, just cardstock, inkjet printer on it, stick an in tag into it, ship it off, right? Like that's raw profit. But most people don't buy cards. The other problem is that most people don't buy Amiibo either. Switch users at best will buy 1 or 2 Amiibo. Okay? There's a few collectors. My audience is mostly collectors and people who already have Amiibo, so there's a selection bias here, but there's just not that many Amiibo fans anymore. So what we have with Nintendo is a huge sunk cost that is not likely to recoup, and it's not likely to recoup because it's on such incredibly thin margins. What does this mean going forward? I think Amiibo is going to end with Switch. I don't think it's going to continue with Switch 2 in its current form. Maybe it continues in some sort of like digitized scan it with your phone kind of deal. I think that would actually be really cool. You scan an Amiibo with your phone and then it just like ends up on your Nintendo account. That would be so dope because you still got to buy the figure. They don't have to have the per unit down payment investment. Most phones have NFC in them that can scan Amiibo anyway. It just makes sense, right? Alternatively, they just don't do it at all. It's a hassle for devs to include Amiibo functionality a lot. It gets a lot of criticism, which it doesn't deserve, but it gets a lot of criticism. And Amiibo also just takes up shelf space that could be used to sell other Nintendo goods. You know what I'm saying? I like Amiibo. I think they're pretty cool. I've liked Amiibo for like 10 years now. They're not my favorite thing in the world anymore because, you know, you get old and you like other things. But if we do see Amiibo with the Switch 2, that would be a good thing. I just don't think it'll happen. So tell me in the comments what you think. I'm very curious, but this may be the end of Amiibo.